Okay, well, welcome everyone. It's about 5 minutes after, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the first informational workshop for the Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership, a new program at the City of Tulsa administered through the Tulsa Planning Office. I'm going to kick it over to Travis to get us started, and then we'll do an overview of what we're going to talk about today so we can kind of get the lay of the land and go over some tips for participating today.
Thanks, Emily. And good morning, everyone. I'm Travis Hulse. I'm the principal planner at the Tulsa Planning Office. Emily Scott, who will really lead us now and into the future, is going to walk us through the details of today. But before she gets started, I just wanted to thank you for being here, tell you how excited we are to start the Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership. And I truly mean partnership. What you'll hear today is brand new. It's about being focused. It's about being intentional, having a meaningful impact in the neighborhoods throughout Tulsa. And we're looking for partners, people who are excited about their neighborhood, eager to get to work, anxious to work together. We're looking for a lot of enthusiasm in this work. So today you'll get a chance to hear from a couple of different folks who are committed to this program and really working together with us thus far as we've started out in this new journey. Emily, who you've just met, Amy Ulmer, who's kind of behind the wheel here on our Zoom call at this work session. You'll get a chance to hear from a couple of our partners who are a part of this. Louisa Krug, who's our Destination Districts Manager here at the Tulsa Planning Office. And then Joel Hensley, who's a neighborhood liaison over in working in neighborhoods. So we're excited for you to be here. Emily, myself, the rest of the team, excited to begin this conversation with you. So thanks again for being here.
So what are we going to cover for today? These workshops, we're doing 6 of these sessions for folks interested in the Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership Program. There's been a little confusion, but these 6 sessions are all roughly the same. We just wanted 6 sessions where people would be able to make space in their calendar and schedule for it. So don't worry about having to attend each one. So today what we're going to go over is an overview of the program. What is the Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership? What is this new model and approach to neighborhood work for the city? We're going to meet one of our community partners as well as a city partner. So this program is really focused on bringing lots of different entities and groups together to support a neighborhood that enrolls for a set period of time. So it'd be great to hear from some of the folks that really intend on supporting us in that program. We're also going to walk through a little bit of what enrollment in the program looks like, what the neighborhood planning process looks like, some of the goals and outcomes that we have for the neighborhoods that participate. And then the second half of our presentation, which should bring us to about 45-50 minutes, we're going to go through each section of our application, which is now live on our website, tulsaplanning.org/VNP. There's also lots of other great information on that website, as well as a frequently asked questions section, which we'll continue to add to. And we want to leave a whole 30 minutes at the end of this conversation to address your questions. So that can be a question about the program itself, or if you have a specific question about filling out the application or what the program might look like in your neighborhood, we want to allow enough space for that conversation. So just some quick tips to remember. We are in a bit of a different format than some Zoom meetings. We're in a webinar format. So what that means is everyone who's come into the session today is automatically muted and their camera is off. So if you have specific questions that you would like to be addressed at the end of the session, there's a couple different tools you can utilize to state those. We have a Q&A box that should be showing up at the bottom of your Zoom screen. That's a section where you can post questions. If you aren't able to access or find that box, you can always use the chat button, which should also be at the bottom of your screen, and you can put your questions there. So Amy's going to be taking a look at both our Q&A and our chat, grabbing questions that come up so that we can make sure we address them and get to all of them. And then finally, if you would just like to verbally participate or vocally ask your question, you can raise your hand and then I can unmute you and you can participate that way. So we will have a very short amount of time for a couple questions for our partners that are joining us today, but please reserve ones that are, specific overall about the program or the application towards the end, so we can address those all together. So I'm going to get us started here on that first piece of overview. What is the Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership? So as we mentioned, this is a brand new program and approach for neighborhoods. It's modeled and designed to target public investments, connect community partners, and ultimately attract private investment for a neighborhood that's aligned with a neighborhood's vision for quality improvement. So that concept of a neighborhood's vision is really important. The first portion of working with the neighborhood does involve an intentional engaged planning process and an opportunity for residents and other stakeholders to come together and really pin down what values and goals we'd like to follow as we enroll in this program. So why are we developing this new program for the city of Tulsa? So many recent strategies and work across city departments is really aligning to support this approach. We have the work of Resilient Tulsa, the recent emphasis and efforts that have been going on in the city on affordable housing. We had the affordable housing strategy, many housing studies and surveys, really looking at the importance of housing in our community. And then we also have our internal aim plan, which is looking to align our goals toward a shared outcomes. And those outcomes include working towards equitable economic development, building a more resilient Tulsa, so our community members and residents that can be resilient and able to recover in the face of shocks and stressors, including the one we are currently in with this global pandemic. This program is also addressing an internal desire to address the geographic life expectancy gaps that we have been able to notice spatially across Tulsa. We know that there are certain sections that experience disparate outcomes versus others across the city. So this intentional geographic focus of a program is really in line with addressing that. And then overall, what we're all working for as public servants here at the city of Tulsa is ultimately improving the quality of life for neighbors, residents, currently and for future Tulsans. So how does this program work? Ultimately, it's modeled off of successful programs that we have seen nationwide. So this is something where we've really been taking the last year to connect with and understand other cities that have taken this approach. The idea is to really focus short term to leverage some long-term successes for the neighborhood, going back to that long-term goal of overall improving the quality of a neighborhood and encouraging naturally occurring private investment. So when we talk about neighborhood quality, what goes into that? So we know the overall conditions of a neighborhood go into its neighborhood quality. So overall conditions, things like the underlying housing market, home values, and social concerns like crime and safety, all the different elements that make up a neighborhood go into its quality. We also have local inventory. So think assets and liabilities. So things like the built environment, public infrastructure. It can also be assets like location and proximity. All of those feed directly into neighborhood quality. So in order to support or address that process, this program seeks to introduce public investment into that picture. And it also seeks to leverage that public investment by bringing in outside community partners and other external support that can increase the impact of that investment. Ultimately, what we're working for is to improve the feedback loop of public and private investment in a neighborhood to increase its quality of life overall. So how does this particular program work in terms of how we decide where the program is going to be focused? Unlike other programs that have been citywide, because this program is seeking to help those neighborhoods that may be of most need, the beginning of program development started with a really in-depth analysis of understanding where we're seeing long-term disparate outcomes play out across the city. So lots of different indicators go into understanding that concept. For 2021, this program year, we really took a focus on Center for Disease Control's social determinants of health. So that graphic at the bottom of the screen is the 5 main categories, but ultimately these are tried and true, well-researched concepts that show what elements of the neighborhood and built environment can contribute to public health outcomes. So we really narrowed in on that concept, recognizing that we were in a public health crisis, but also that we want to address long-term life expectancy gaps with this program and overall quality of life. So after we took a look at what we labeled COVID vulnerability or this vulnerability aspect across the city, we then started to look a little bit more at the neighborhood structure, some elements that can point to historic disinvestment. Sometimes that shows up in the housing market with home values over time. And we also looked at redlining, which we know can be a sign of historical disinvestment. And from there, we narrowed in on the areas that we would like to prioritize for the rollout of this program. For our first program year, we're intending to work with 1 up to 2 neighborhoods for the program year. And like I mentioned before, it's designed to work with the neighborhoods for about 2 to 3 years, but that timeline is not a cliff. That's more of a minimum. And it speaks to the concept that the program is really modeled to intentionally work with the neighborhood through an engaged process. So think of that time as a minimum, not a maximum. We want to meet the neighbors where they are and make sure that we're actually getting our work accomplished together. So why did we have this focus on COVID-19? We've touched on this a little bit more, but I do like to emphasize this, especially if you start to see other programs around the country. You'll notice that largely this program model has historically focused on just attracting private investment and improving the underlying housing market overall. We would be remiss to take that exact approach in the middle of a global pandemic. So that's why we pulled in many of those indicators we talked about previously that we know affect or agitate public health outcomes, recognizing that we are in a public health crisis and that community needs have dramatically shifted from this process. So that brings us to a map that hopefully some of us have seen so far. This is also on our website. We have an interactive version of this map as well as the PDF on that site. And I feel like before I reference the site 18 more times, Travis or Amy, does someone mind dropping that in the chat box? Thank you. So these are the 11 neighborhood areas that we would like to focus on for our first program year. So I'd like to emphasize this was in order to determine greatest need and impact, but also this isn't static. The places that we reach out to in the future as this program evolves and changes may not always be the same places. So just things to remember when we talk about this concept of eligibility and the geographic focus that we want to play for the 2021 program year. So that's kind of the overview section of this presentation. We're going to move on now to meeting 2 partners that are on the call with us today. So first up is going to be one of our community partners, Louisa Krug, who I've been working with for a little over a year now. She's the manager of the Destination Districts program, which is a Main Street level program that seeks and has a lot of the same intentions and mission and visions of this program. It looks to overall improve place. It has a geographic focus, and it looks to provide many different services for the participants enrolled.
So like Emily said, I am the manager of the Destination Districts program at the Tulsa Planning Office. I've been in this position for a little bit over a year. Really, the goal of the Destination Districts program is to create vibrant places where Tulsans want to be. So right now we're working with Main Street organizations to promote revitalization through inclusive economic development. So right now there are 4 Main Street programs in Tulsa. So there are 2 that have been in existence for 10 plus years. That would be Route 66 Main Street and Kendall Whittier Main Street, which you might already be familiar with. And then about a year ago, we applied for 2 new programs that were officially designated in March of 2020. So that was the Historic Greenwood District Main Street and East Tulsa Main Street. So East Tulsa Main Street is sometimes called the International District, but really the area at 21st and Garnett. So throughout the past year, we've really been, obviously everyone knows the past year has been weird, but we've been working a lot to really kind of work on that vision and strategic planning for the organization. Obviously, there's some things that we haven't been able to do because of COVID. If you think about main streets, like places like Kendall Whittier have events and things like that. And that obviously hasn't been a focus, but we've spent the last year really thinking about what the vision and the plan is for those areas. So we've created boards. We're in the process of applying to be a 501c3 organizations. And, I say we because I work so closely with these organizations, but really these will be freestanding organizations. And then my job is really kind of to be a liaison between them and the Tulsa Planning Office and the City of Tulsa. So Main Street really focuses on 4 pillars, which are design, promotion, economic vitality, and organization. And there's a variety of different things that could go into each of those, but just to kind of give you some examples, design would maybe be things like placemaking and public art and putting murals in the area, or it could be things like giving grants to businesses for facade improvements or new signs or just things that really make the area more aesthetically pleasing. Economic vitality could be things like supporting organizations, maybe with small grants to help, say, with the permitting process, things like that that might cost. Small business owners might not be thinking about the costs when they are starting their business. Or it could be things like events that bring people into stores. So something like a First Friday type event where it's really trying to bring people to the district and get them to spend money. Organization really kind of focuses on like the foundation of the organization. So things like hiring an executive director and having volunteers and just building out like a strong committee structure so that you can actually get this done. I think one of the really strong benefits of the Main Street program is that you're connected to a national network of Main Street programs, but another benefit is that you're required to have an executive director. And so all of the people that work on the boards and committees are usually volunteers, and that's amazing. But the idea that you have someone every day really kind of promoting the district really helps to keep the work moving. And then promotion, I think that's the last one I haven't mentioned. Promotion would really be basically promoting the district. So things like creating a brand and an identity for the district, events, special events, and promoting those, how to get people to the district, things like that. So I think that the Main Street program has a lot of really good benefits, but there's also benefits that could be achieved even if you're not a full-fledged Main Street program. So I think when I'm thinking about partnership with this program, I think that, one of my future goals, I've been in this position for a year and really focused in that year on those two new programs just because they're so new. But a future goal would be to expand this program to other districts in Tulsa. And so I think part of that would be recognizing that not every area in Tulsa might need a Main Street, but there might be some parts of that kind of overall framework and model that could be beneficial to a variety of different districts. So when I think about partnership with this program, I kind of think about that. So there might be neighborhoods that apply that well suited to have a full Main Street program, but there also might be districts that just want help creating, like a volunteer business association, or really just need help with creating a vision for the district that's very basic and, could maybe grow into something where they were ready for or needed a Main Street. So I think that taking some of the lessons learned from a lot of these Main Streets and from that model could be a great way to partner with the Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership. We also would like to just create programs to facilitate placemaking and revitalization. So again, that might be much smaller than a full Main Street program, but potentially having programs in the future that allow us to support small public art projects or cleanup events or something like that. I really see my role as a liaison between districts and the city of Tulsa. So just providing that sort of technical assistance. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but sometimes just having someone to email and say, do you know who I should talk to, can be really helpful. And then we've also created a commercial toolkit that we'll be adding to that really is just it has about 10 to 12 topics right now, but just providing different resources on, there's so many things out there on the internet of like how to do, different placemaking projects or how to start a business association or things like that. But I tried to compile all of those into one document to give people a good place to start and recognize like what city department might be helpful to help people with different things. So that just recently became available on our website, and I'll be updating that as new programs are developed or just as identify other needs for commercial districts. And then of course, my job will continue to support the Main Street programs, but I do hope that it grows past just the 4 Main Street programs that we have now. So that was a lot really quickly. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or maybe Joel is going to talk and then we'll do questions.
We have a couple moments. Does anyone have any questions for Louisa, her work, the Destination District or the National Main Street model? So Tracy Chandler has their hand raised. You should be unmuted.
Okay, so what is the website where you were talking about the commercial toolkit?
Yeah, so that is available on the Tulsa Planning Office website. Let me grab it or get the link real fast and I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful. I think all these programs having a toolkit or just a place to just go access those resources in case you just want to do it on your own or want to pursue something on your own and don't want to wait for us. We're trying to be more intentional with toolkits like that. We also have a neighborhood toolkit on our website. And I'm going to check the chat here. Oh, that was the site.
I'll say if you have thoughts about things that you would like to see in the toolkit, let me know, because I have kind of a running list of things I've thought about that I'll just be working on as I, have the time, but please let me know. I'm happy to add to that list. The other thing I forgot to mention that I think I really want to work on this year that we've started preliminarily planning for is just having more like training options. So we have a list of maybe 10 different topics that we think would be beneficial for business owners or commercial districts, like how to get the media interested in your event, or how to set up e-commerce, or how to run a social media page. So we're starting to identify people that could speak about those topics that know a lot more than I do about each of those specific topics. So once we have that, we're going to try to have a training every 1 or 2 months on Zoom, but then also have them archived so people can come back and watch them later.
And we had one more question about the main street that's at 21st and what it's called.
Yeah, so they're kind of going through a naming process right now. Right now, we're just calling it East Tulsa Main Street, just to be kind of as generic as possible, with the intention that as we're going through that planning process, we're going through the naming process. It just started in March of 2020, and so they really have been in the planning stages, but they're getting ready to work on a website and social media so they can really kind of launch and say that this is a new organization.
And not a question, but worth mentioning, you got a shout out here, Louisa, on your work with developing the Greenwood Main Street program, and also just an acknowledgement of how important the connection of neighborhoods are to their business and economic development.
Yes, Terry's on the board of the Historic Greenwood District Main Street, so we work together quite a bit.
So we do have one more question, how destination districts place artwork on the streets. Oh, right. Maybe that's something that more specifically you'd be up for following up with Terry on, that, of the work of trying to get our artwork on streets.
Yeah, we can also talk to Dennis. I think he would be a good resource. One of our other coworkers works with the Route 66 Commission, and they've been really involved in like the stamping on Route 66. So I can follow up and connect those people to talk about that.
Okay. Oh, and I do have 2 more hands raised. So let me just, Casey Chandler, did you have?
So with this application process, is it like a competition as to who will be chosen for the program?
For the Vibrant Neighborhoods program?
Yes.
I wouldn't label it a competition. It's more like an assessment. And when we break down the application piece by piece, we'll talk about what after applying looks like for folks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We are going to move on, and we have our other partner who's going to talk to us today. And this is a city department working in neighborhoods, which you all may be familiar with. So Joel Hensley is a neighborhood liaison through working in neighborhoods, and he is going to talk about the different services and support that WIN provides. And Joel, take it away.
Thanks for having me. I see a lot of familiar names on the attendees list there, so happy that everyone could come and attend today. Some of you might be familiar with what we do. Again, my name is Joel. I'm one of the neighborhood liaisons in the Working Neighborhoods Department. We have a few divisions, and I feel horrible because I actually left out our administration division on this list, and one of the ladies was like, hey, we hold this whole place together, so definitely got to shout them out real quick. The investigations team, and I'll go through all these, and then I'm going to kind of say how we kind of feed into this program. The investigations team, we enforce all the code of ordinances throughout the city of Tulsa to make sure people are maintaining their properties in the way that's in accordance with those ordinances. We also enforce the zoning code and property maintenance standards. Then my division, neighborhood services, there's the 2 of us, the neighborhood liaisons, myself and Alicia Myers. We work with all the neighborhood groups throughout the entire city of Tulsa, run the registry. We do volunteer coordination through the Serve Tulsans program. We run the Adopt a Spot program and a few other things. We also have our special events coordinator, Skipper Bain. So if any special events come through your neighborhood and you have some issues, he'd be the one to contact. There's also the housing division. They do all the HUD-funded programs with the home repair. There's 2 programs in that division. Those perfectly feed into this. If you have anybody that's low income in your neighborhood that needs some help repairing their home, that's a perfect place to do that. And finally, we have the Animal Welfare Division. They do a whole bunch of things. Few that I have listed here is just your general animal care for those in the shelter, spay and neuter, and we go out and we do that throughout neighborhoods as well as within the clinic, the licensing for pets, and much, much more. Happy to dive deeper into that. Now, a few things that we can do just specifically related to this program. With investigations, we do key neighborhood targeted investigations. So we just went through, I believe, the Hawthorne neighborhood in partnership with a nonprofit in that neighborhood to make sure that the neighborhood is clean. If anybody has any volunteer needs, that we can service them in that way. We provided dumpsters for neighborhood cleanup. We worked with our refuse and recycling department. We actually went block by block and picked up trash outside of homes. And then, like I said, there was a volunteer component of that where they had an issue. A lot of these neighbors had issues with trees. And so we did tree trimming and things of that nature. So that's one way we do targeted investment into neighborhoods. And then, of course, we come back through again and we just do a whole sweep, and we continue to do that until we've addressed multiple issues within the neighborhood. And that usually takes 2 to 3 months to do that. And then as far as our part in the neighborhood services division, like I said before, if your neighborhood has any need, honestly, it runs the gambit of things. So if you want to do neighborhood cleanups, we provide dumpsters, trash bags, vests, and gloves directly to you. Now, those cleanups do look a little bit different today because of the pandemic, but we definitely try to provide you with the correct safety precautions and even a checklist of things that you can do to make sure those cleanups are organized in the correct manner. And that goes from all the way down to specific one-on-one talking to neighborhoods to get them organized. So we really do a lot of things inside each neighborhood, and we try to target those based on what the needs of that specific neighborhood is, because we all know that Tulsa has a lot of different needs in depending on where you live, and we try to meet you where you are and address those needs through whatever services we can. And if we can't provide those directly, we find the people that can. So that's what we were really trying to do. And it goes back to what Emily was saying at the beginning of this presentation. We just really want the quality of life to be improved for every single Tulsan, that we can improve their health outcomes and life expectancies. And that's really our bottom line. And that's what we're all trying to do here today. That kind of leads into housing. If you know anybody in your neighborhood and if they need assistance to fill out the applications for that HUD funding to get their home done, we do emergency repairs, and that could be water heaters, that could be air conditioning units, faulty electrical, maybe some roofing issues, and then it goes all the way up to full home repairs. So that would be foundation issues and roofing and structural and things like that. And then even I think there is some assistance that we can find if you have sewer plumbing issues as well. And then, of course, targeted in the side of neighborhoods, we hear a lot about dogs and cats and things of that nature, especially on our trail systems. And we're actually right now implementing new ways to help specifically in trails and in neighborhoods to track dogs. We've got some new equipment because we all know dogs don't stay in one place. We have to follow them and find them where they are. So we actually got some new equipment to help with that. And then, of course, we are big on spay and neuter. We want to make sure to control our pet populations. And the best way to do that is meet people where they are. So if you do need a clinic, those are a little bit more difficult to coordinate because there's a lot that needs to be done and sterilized areas for that. But that is something that we can do inside of neighborhoods and things of that nature. So there's a lot of ways we can feed into this specific program. And once the selection process has been made, we're going to do our best to help out where we can and when we can. And also, just speaking from my department in particular, if you do have neighborhood needs, let me know, let Alicia know, and we're going to meet you where you are and do our best to help you out. Hopefully, that is what Emily was hoping from me.
That's
And
perfect.
looking forward to working with each and every one of you in the future. Just let me know how I can help.
Thank you so much, Joel. Does anyone have any questions while we have them for a few more moments? I'll check our Q&A box here. This is a question about the eligibility area. So we can circle back to that during our end. I'll make sure that we address that question. Joel, if individuals maybe just have something like you mentioned, a need for their individual home or would like to be connected to any of the programs, is 311 the best first place or just reaching directly out to you?
It really depends on what the need is. If you have a specific service request, 311 is always the way to go. 311tulsa.com, Tulsa 311 app, or by phone, just dialing 311. But if you have anything outside of just like a service need, I'm happy to direct you. But cityoftulsa.org, you can always just go there. I always tell people just use the search box that's right on the front page, and that's the best way to find things. But if you have any direct questions, feel free to email me. That's really the best way. And that's jhensley@cityoftulsa.org.
Tara Toomey, is it? Here we go. Should be able to unmute now, Tara.
He just answered my question, so I
Okay.
don't have a question now, but thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, well, thank you so much, Joel, and Louisa as well, if you're still here. It's awesome to meet what we mean when we say community partners and all the different people that we're connecting and facilitating with to make this program happen. It really is a large and evolving group of great services and supports that exist in the city, and we're excited to be able to kind of focus them and connect them with the neighborhood that works in this program. So we're going to get back to our overview of the program and launch a little bit into what it looks like to be enrolled and to start working with us. As I mentioned before, the beginning of this process is really embarking on an engaged neighborhood plan. So making what kind of would resemble maybe a small area plan, but a little more intentional, focused, and action-based. So the first part of that is trying to get the neighborhood together. So neighbors, residents, stakeholders, and by stakeholders, that could be the local church community, schools, local groups and orgs that operate within the neighborhood, all of the groups that call that neighborhood home and really have a vested interest in seeing it succeed. The first part of working together is establishing what a shared vision looks like and creating some goals for working in the program. The second part of planning is to really drill down and come up with some specific strategies and actions that are compatible with that neighborhood's vision. So we don't want to come in with a set way to do things and kind of drop in and just say, here's what we're going to do. We want to take the time to have the conversations, find some consensus among neighbors, and understand what we need to do collectively to improve our neighborhood. So towards the end of that is where you start to prioritize projects and initiatives. In the planning world, we use the term action matrix, which really just means looking at all the things that you'd like to do on your timeline and understanding how they fit on your timeline. What are those short-term easy wins? What's the low-hanging fruit that we can start to chase immediately? What are the longer-term heavier lifts that we're going to need to work a little longer toward, or maybe find different tools and resources for? And then we intend to work together on starting to realize those actions and strategies. So emphasizing once again that 2 to 3 years is a minimum, not a maximum, of working together to start to realize our shared plan for neighborhood improvement. So we went over some of the services today, but I think it's important to outline what we mean when we say pooling services and support for a neighborhood. So there's an element of it that's coming from the public side, city investment and city tools and resources that we'd like to be able to focus in a neighborhood. And that includes things like sidewalk and pedestrian infrastructure, neighborhood beautification support that we have access to. Those are things like mulching, graffiti abatement, paint supplies for mural work. We also are working closely with the development of this program with our public safety and crime prevention entities, the fire department, the police department. They're plugged into the evolution of this program. And if it's decided that the neighborhood would like to pursue some safety and crime prevention initiatives, we can plug them into this process as well. As we mentioned at the beginning, the city has really renewed a focus on affordable housing and housing development overall on the heels of our new affordable housing strategy and a lot of our studies and analysis. So those new tools and resources that are coming out from the city side, we would like to work to connect those to the neighborhood if housing needs are one that is identified. Some of the things that Joel mentioned with WIN as well, this concept of targeted code enforcement, just how helpful that can be to really focus that in an area for a short amount of time. And then there's lots of different ways that we can plug in small business, retail, and commercial support, pulling in that local economic development piece, understanding what kinds of grants, loans, or other programs might be available to support the neighborhood's economic development picture. And then we've been working over the last couple of months to build a growing network of external partners. So these aren't city departments, but folks that have a shared mission and vision for improving the quality of life here in Tulsa. And we want to plug in and support with this work. People that can provide systems and services that we can't. So this is a particular focus with our 2021 program year on public health outcomes. So working with the Tulsa Health Department and other public health providers, if that comes to the surface as a neighborhood need. We have some community partners particularly dedicated to home ownership and home buyer access and education, some tree and landscaping services. Also want to be able to connect youth programs and youth services. So apart from intentionally working if there is a neighborhood school, making sure we connect with that school, but also working with other services and groups that can provide maybe after school or other educational programs for the kiddos in the neighborhood. Food access, accessing healthy foods, and even some entities interested in housing construction. So that's just an example of the network of folks like Louisa and Joel that we're looking to pull in to provide for the neighborhoods. We've been over this a little bit, but I think it's important to kind of reiterate what we're really looking for in terms of a neighborhood outcome. We always like to be able to look back and say, were we successful? How are we measuring this? When we say impact, what does that mean? What we are really working towards with these neighborhoods is to really get long-term neighborhood-led community development. So what does that look like? A big element of that is resource connection. Sometimes it's much more important to know who to ask versus what to ask. We want to make sure there's a framework in place with the neighborhoods where they can be guided once we leave our intentional work with them of how to access resources and different information for their future work. We also want to be able to create an action plan for the neighborhood to follow so that there is a cohesive, referenceable strategy so that we know what it means to be keeping our successes on track. We know what success looks like to us. And going back to the concept before, we want to see some of those short and long-term wins. So implementation is a big piece of this. This is why this is a brand new program, because it really strives to have outcomes during the short period of time that we work with neighborhoods. Finally, neighborhood capacity building. So how to stay engaged, how to connect more neighbors into this group, how to find other stakeholders within your neighborhood so that the work can continue to go and can continue to grow into the future. And there's a lot that goes into building the momentum and capacity of a neighborhood organization. So that is a core tenet of this program as well, of building that internal capacity. So now we're going to get into each section of the application. I'm going to give you an overview of what that section is asking for, because it may ask some individual questions that some of you have taken a look or are interested in applying have maybe already come to. The application is on our website. There's a PDF on there. You can fill that out digitally, but you can also print that out and fill it out, drop it off at our Tulsa planning office, or mail it into us. If you do it digitally, you can email it to me, escott@incog.org. Applications for this process for the 2021 program year are due by March 5th, and we expect to get responses back to everyone who applies by March 31st. So what is this application actually going to ask you for? The first two sections are largely contact information. So we just require one applicant contact name. So that's one person who is ideally a neighborhood resident, but could also be a property owner or local business owner who is willing and able to be a sturdy contact for this program. So email, phone, mailing address, we want to be able to just reach one point person to be able to contact with follow-up information. The second information that we need is info for what we're calling a neighborhood sponsor. So this is a little bit different than other programs, but we think it's really important that there is another entity or group or interest within the neighborhood that is able to commit to this program, come in and support the individual residents as they go through this process so that there is some more responsibility and accountability throughout the process. So that can be your local neighborhood church that's dedicated to supporting. It could be the registered neighborhood association. If you have a community center or org within your neighborhood. And if you're a little unclear on who a neighborhood sponsor could be, definitely reach out to us. We can have conversations, we can brainstorm who that would look like. We might be able to connect you to a neighborhood sponsor that is already interested in sponsoring a geographic area, but might not know how to reach residents. So if you're struggling with that piece of the application, definitely reach out. The third section is just telling us your neighborhood boundary. So we have those 11 eligible neighborhood areas. They're A through K on the application. So you select in that first question which area your neighborhood is in, but that's not, we're not holding the neighborhood to those boundaries. That's just an eligible area. So as actual neighborhood residents, you go ahead and tell us what you consider to be your neighborhood boundaries. Put the north, east, west, south boundaries, and then attach a map. And I don't want that to be a barrier. So I've put a really terribly drawn map that I did on Paint over Google Maps in there. You can hand draw a map on a piece of paper. If you're really struggling with providing a physical visual map, reach out to staff as well, and we can help you with that piece. The eligibility map is also the last page of the application packet, just for reference. So this brings us to what are kind of the open-ended long form questions in the application. So section 4 has 2 parts. The first one is neighborhood assessment. So this is where you have an opportunity to tell us what you'd like to work on by being enrolled in this program. It's also super helpful for us to understand what are the assets in your neighborhood? What's special and unique? What do you love about your neighborhood? We want to know all those things. Again, going back, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We really want to work with the neighborhood on their own vision. This piece of the application helps us understand what areas of high concern are, what the neighborhood would like to uplift or really accentuate by working on this program, and really what the neighborhood would like to work on in this program. The second piece talks a little bit to that element of neighborhood capacity that we talked about wanting to build and support throughout enrollment of this program. So things that we'd like to know in this section: how's your neighborhood currently organized? Are the neighbors really plugged into the neighborhood association? Do you have regular meeting attendance? Do folks tend to know what's going on? Or do we gather at a neighbor's house? Is it kind of waxing and waning? We'd love to know what it's like right now for neighborhood organization, because that's going to help us understand how to build and strengthen that, how to plug more neighbors into that process. Again, this is an in-depth planning program, so we don't want it to be just the responsibility of 2 to 3 neighbors. We want to be able to pull in as many people as possible. An element of that is the neighborhood applying. We want to make sure also has a desire to work with a bigger group of neighbors than just the ones that apply. We do want this to be inclusive of all neighbors in the area. So this last section is pretty cut and dry. More or less, it's just a way to show your support for us. So like we mentioned, we just require one applicant contact that can be able to be reached if needed to, as well as the neighborhood sponsor that can be reached. But we also would like to know what kind of support is already existing in the neighborhood for this program. So the last page is just a blank page where you can either gather the information of your local neighbors or other stakeholders in your neighborhood that would like to participate, or you can have folks fill it out themselves. This just helps us get a sense of how many people were interested in applying and being engaged in this process. So just some quick things to remember. Again, applications are due 5 p.m. on March 5th. Every applicant that applies will hear back by March 31st, and we will include information as to why or why not you weren't selected for this program year. It's not just me. There's other planning staff, city department leadership, and our community partners are going to be reviewing and assessing applications, coming to the table to understand where we should start working for our first year. And I want to reiterate that this is not intended to be exclusive. It's really just a part of the program model. We work with neighborhoods, and then we sequence other neighborhoods in. Hopefully doesn't come off as a competitive or a yes or no vibe. And if you weren't selected to start your work in your neighborhood this year, that doesn't mean that it can't happen later this year or early next year. And very open to working with you to understanding what we can do for the application in the future. Also, something that we'd like to do as this program rolls out, we mentioned a lot of different tools and resources that are available. If you're interested in if you need access to services and support for your individual home or an individual service you need to be connected with, we have our neighborhood toolkit, the commercial toolkit that Louisa mentioned is online, and also working in neighborhoods, that overview of all the programs and services they have. If the neighborhood planning model isn't an approach that you would like to do, but you still have needs for your home or your neighborhood, please reach out. There's other tools and resources that you can access and that we'd love to be able to connect you with and guide you through. So I'm going to leave this contact page up. Contact any 3 of us. We'll be working through the application process. We can provide tips, guidance, help you through with any specific questions. We're here to help. We don't want this to be a barrier to participation. We can sit down with you and look over this process together. The next section that we're going to go into is our Q&A. I'm going to check our time real quick. And that's great. We're actually right on schedule to have a half hour left of our presentation for this. So I'm going to head over here. So Amy has started to put these questions in here so we can all reference them. So the first one that popped up that I haven't been able to answer yet was about the eligibility map, area A from 46. Yes, so the first one on the map. Is this question asking about the quality indicators that were used for this area? Or Terry, can you provide me a little more context for this first question?
I was writing real quick, just kind of keeping up with you guys as you were writing, and you have to zoom in and out on your phone.
Right.
And so, in looking at those areas, kind of from what I gathered, COVID was kind of used as a means to use as an indicator to look at the health outcomes and dealing with this pandemic we're in, to go, wow, in light of that, we're choosing, from what I heard, to start in 2021 in that area. That was A. Am I correct in that?
No, A is just one of the 11 areas that are eligible. So the ranking is, there's no priority or timeline associated with the A through K labeling. It's just a way to label the areas. But anyone in any of those 11 areas is eligible to apply for this program year.
Okay, I thought specifically they were going to be chosen from area A because the indicators were so terrible. So anyway, I'm straight now. Thank you.
Okay. No, I totally see how that can be confusing. We wrestled a while of whether to number them or label them letters, and inevitably it looks like a sequence, but I get that. Okay, so this question from Caesar, are there any grants or loans for home restoration in Area D? So the grant and loan programs for home restoration that Joel outlined are available citywide. I do know many of them have income requirements and eligibility requirements attached to them, but anything that's available citywide would be available in Area D as long as the homeowner is eligible. So I would definitely reach out to Joel. I think his information is in the chat, and he may even have much better insight on what specific veterans programs are available for homeowners as well. So this is about the youth component and youth input. This is a great comment of how important it is to include youth in the planning process. So we do want to make sure that we're thinking creatively and out of the box of how to make sure that youth and school-age children are able to participate in this process. We want to engage with a neighborhood school if it's present. And for the reasons that you mentioned, it's really important to include that as a component to neighborhood work. So Diana Emerson, recommendations for the best approach for finding others in your neighborhood that might be interested. This is a great question. So on our website, along with our PDF map, there's an interactive map. You can enter your address, see what part you're in. But if you click on those eligibility areas, there's the information for all of the registered neighborhood associations and umbrella associations within that area. So that's a good first place to start. And I could definitely help you get that individual contact information. There's also a map on the city's website. of course, doesn't just have the 11 areas. So I kind of created the secondary version with just that info. But that's a good place to start to see if the neighborhood association or other business or umbrella orgs would be interested in partnering with you on that. And they might have some insight. They also might have a Facebook or other social media account that they would allow you to post on to get folks interested as well. Diana, which neighborhood area are you in?
Hi there. I work at a building that we own at on 11th Street, so neighborhood G.
Oh, okay, 21st and Memorial area. That also would be a great time to reach out to the East Tulsa Main Street or the International District Main Street that Louisa was mentioning. There's a lot of momentum in that area and that Main Street and commercial revitalization program out there. And Louisa in particular could probably connect you with some other groups or organizations outside of the neighborhood association group.
Thank you.
For sure.
Just asking if we can share this deck of slides, and I know that we are going to share it on our YouTube channel. And
yeah, I can put this slide deck on our website, but this is recorded and it'll also be available on our YouTube to go back and reference and watch. But I will definitely make sure the slide deck for the workshops makes it up to the site. And we have all of your contact information as a Zoom registrant, so we can send you follow-up information at the end of this. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments or things that weren't too clear?
I was just going to follow up on a comment on that last question, to always consider your city councilor kind of as a point of contact. You know, they're always looking for re-election, and they have a database of people to reach out into neighborhoods and get them to meetings. I've worked both in North and South Tulsa. I called Jeannie Q, and within a day's notice, she had 5 or 6 administrators from the city of Tulsa out with the neighborhood association, trying to really make things happen. So anyway, that's kind of a point of contact, because they have a direct self-interest in your community's welfare.
Definitely. No, that's a really great point.
When I was in the fire marshal's office, I actually would have Councilor Henderson send out a letter ahead of time to tell the community that we'd be by your house Saturday morning to put in a smoke detector. Boy, when they got that letter from the counselor, the streets would be lined with people waiting for us to show up. But it created so much synergy with everybody working together. It was kind of a win-win for the whole community.
No, that's a great idea. Got Carol Lindley.
Yes, our homeowners association is thinking about wants to make improvements to the driveway, which is really rough at the Willows, and it's in Area H. They really don't have the money to do it, so they would get a loan. Their plan is to get a loan, but they would have to assess in order to pay it outright, they'd have to assess everybody like $5,000, which is just unthinkable for most of us. I'm wondering if that is something, since it's an HOA already, is that something that the city can help with?
Is this for a street repair to a private street?
Yes, well, it's in the homeowners association. We wondered if maybe putting in like a permeable driveway, something that's eco-friendly, would be good, or another option might be to reduce our electric bill by putting solar in on the carports. We're just kind of trying to figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the HOA in terms of like the membership model and therefore how it approaches infrastructure projects. Travis, do you think the best way, particularly for like street repair, of at least like getting it on like streets and stormwater radar, do they prefer requests and concerns to come through 311?
Yeah, I think so. I was just going to mention, Carol, another one of our partners who's going to join us in a separate informational workshop is the director of Streets and Stormwater, Terry Ball, who's been very involved in our conversations in the evolution of the program. So he would know better for sure the dynamic that you're kind of describing. So either, I think maybe either joining that conversation or we contact him, probably a few things, try to get an answer to that question more directly. But 311, yes, is always kind of a fallback way to just make sure that question is there and will ultimately get directed, rerouted over to who would be Terry Ball.
Okay. There's a school, McClure School is close, and there are no sidewalks between that large condo group and the school. And so would that fall under the same thing, 311? I don't know what 311 is, I guess, either.
Yeah, 311 is essentially the city call center or hub for the catch-all, really, for anything and everything. If you have any type of request, sidewalk specifically, yep, that'd be where you'd want to call, and they'll make sure to get that request over to the appropriate city department. Again, same person, Terry Ball, and the work that he does. They do have an active list of requests for sidewalks just like that. Talked about, and I think Emily even mentioned as part of this program, that being something within the Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership, being a service that we're certainly looking to, but just in general, yeah, if you called 311, that would be the best way to get that on the list. In the event that your area that you're talking about, Carol, isn't selected as part of this first 2021 cycle.
In the event it isn't selected, is not
yeah,
selected?
so I'm just saying, give them a call regardless. I think that'd be a great place to start.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. And you should just be able to dial 311 on your phone from within the city of Tulsa. There's a different number you'll want to use if you're outside of the city. It's on their website. But if you're in the city, you should just be able to dial 311 from your phone to get connected there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so Terry, you have your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to share as another point of contact or point of information, the question about the approach over at the Willow. When I mentioned I had been working out south, it was actually with the Homeowners Association. We had some of those same questions. Another outlet to check for funding for those kind of things is the Neighborhood Stabilization Grant. You might contact the City of Tulsa's new housing director. She took Becky Glico's position. Her name is Christian Bond. That's the very discussion we had with the counselor from out south, Jeannie Q. So anyway, that's another point of contact that your homeowners association could actually apply for that funding to address some of those common element areas you mentioned, like that approach where you first go into the complex and the concrete's all tore up. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
See, we got about 15 minutes left. If anyone has any other questions, anything that I can clarify for anyone or other folks on the call. Okay, well, thank you so much to everyone who attended today. There are 5 more sessions, so if you think of more questions that come up, definitely attend another one and we can get those questions answered. You're very welcome for this workshop. Thank you so much for attending. Like we mentioned, we'll get that information, including the slide deck and the recording of this, and make sure that you know where to find those. But yeah, if you're considering applying and you have some more specific questions that pop up, hop into another session. We've got evenings and Saturdays available. The 2 Saturday sessions will have a representative from Streets and Stormwater on them. So if that is something that you'd like to circle back to, definitely try to pop into those. They're the next 2 Saturdays at 4 o'clock. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much again for attending. And please reach out if you have any questions or support with the application process.